Welcome to a new episode of Parenting and You with me, Dr. Shefali. It is so hard to figure out what our children need from us, from toddlerhood to elementary school to pre-teenagehood and beyond. Like, how on earth are we supposed to know what they need? And they don't even make it clear to us. It's not like they're telling us, Mommy, I need a hug, or Daddy, I need space. No, they just act it out and we're supposed to figure it out. Well, that's what I teach. So I understand when parents find it hard to decipher their children's needs. I always tell parents that we need to attune. And they tell me, Dr. Shefali, how do you attune? Well, that's what this episode is all about. How do we attune to our children? How do we figure out what they need from us? How do we know when to step in and when to back out? When to be in the center stage with them, by their side, and when to go backstage and get behind them and let them take over. Coming up next, a mother whose schedule is so full that she's exhausted and she's constantly fighting with her 4-year-old. Joining me now is Andrea, who's having quite a lot of struggle connecting with her daughter. Here's Andrea. Tell us what's going on.
Hi, Dr. Shefali. Thanks for having me. So my daughter, she's 4 years old. She's my only child. And I have, I'm a working mom, very busy, have lots of things that I have during the day that I think kind of depletes my energy towards bedtime. And I try to let her kind of lead the way in terms of the routine that we have set in place to kind of wind down. However, she's a very rambunctious child, very spirited, very animated, loves to sing and dance. And if I don't kind of push her along to bed, it can take a really long time. And if I'm a lot of times very tired at the end of the day, and sometimes we'll have moments where I yell because I've had it. It's taken too long to get her to bed. And, sometimes trying to just control the situation with her, just try to really get her to listen can be really frustrating. So I get angry. I've yelled at her. And lately, since she's gotten a little bit older, she's been speaking up about it, telling me as soon as my energy shifts and I turn angry, sometimes throwing things, like throwing her toys in the bin and things like that, her energy will shift.
Okay.
And it'll make me feel bad because she'll say things like, that makes me really sad. I don't like that you're mad at me. She'll kind of cower away. She'll like create some distance physically between us. And then I immediately realize like, yeah, I shouldn't have done that. And it's almost like too late because I've already like yelled and gotten upset.
Right. So many of us parents can relate. We've all been there at the end of the day. It's so hard. We're exhausted and we lose it. And all the good work we did till 9 o'clock at night, it's like we've thrown it down the toilet. So what you're talking about is so common. And I'm going to help every parent listening with some real key strategies to help us shift out of this mindset. The first thing I want us to realize is that our children don't care if we're tired or we're working all day. Modern parenting has made the mother and the father work outside the home, and we are exhausted. And this was not the way technically we were supposed to be parenting, right? We were supposed to be parenting where one of the parents is at home, relax with other parents. Really, the women were at home. And I know many feminists will think I'm being anti-feminist, but it's not. It's really what children need. Children need the presence of caregivers who are relaxed and calm, because the most energy we need to have for them is at bedtime, because that's where they get scared. That's where it's a transition. So any transition times, whether to bedtime or whether to teenagehood or whether to elementary school, that's when our children need us the most. And that's when you're losing it the most, because now, here's the real reason we lose it. Because we aren't taking care of ourselves all day. Your little inner 4-year-old is exhausted. you haven't been a good mother to your own little 4-year-old. So by 9 o'clock at night, your own little 4-year-old is hell bent to get your attention, is exhausted, is burnt out, and your real 4-year-old is competing. No wonder you have a little temper tantrum. And I can't tell you how many times at nighttime, I've lost my mind and regretted it, and then creating this never-ending cycle. So your 4-year-old is normal. She's on point. She's clear. She needs mommy when she needs mommy, which is at nighttime, when she's most scared, when she needs that connection the most. So knowing this and knowing that your own little 4-year-old is exhausted, how can we better prepare for the day and the night? What can we do differently during the day so Andrea is not so overwhelmed that at nighttime she's exhausted? What do you think you can do during the day to shift and create that energy that she needs?
I know that I need more breaks.
Exactly.
I know that I need to take more breaks in between the different activities that I'm doing, my work, meetings, transitions from work to picking her up, because I usually kind of like work until the very last minute, go pick her up. And now I'm in mom mode. And then all of the things from there. So it's constantly like chasing the clock. And by that time, like 9 o'clock, like you said, it's like I'm on empty.
Yes, it's the witching hour, I always call it. And we just don't know when we're going to fall apart. And then the children remember that, because that's when they're the most vulnerable and they need the most connection. So keep that in mind, everyone listening. They don't need the fancy toys and the big birthday parties. They need that 15 minutes at the end of the day where their mother or father is calm, collected, present, and confident. So now we need to go back to the parent, that's you, and ask you, why are you pushing yourself as if it's the last day on earth, right? I'm sure you live your days like, oh my goodness, if I don't do it right now, then everything's going to fall apart. What inside you, and all mothers out there are doing this, we're pushing ourselves, trying to be the best cooks, and then the best cheerleaders, and then the best wives, and then the best this. Why are we doing this? Why do you think Andrea is doing this?
I think I do this because, to your point, it's important for me to feel like I'm accomplishing something and then I'm good at something, whether it's work or, my hobbies, being a mom. It's like, if it's not going my way, or if I'm not like checking the box in a sense, I feel like incomplete or
worthless, a failure.
Yeah.
So of course, I'm going to ask you this question. When Andrea was a little girl, what kind of mother or father did she have? Did she have a controlling mother or father who pushed her to achieve and accomplish things all the time?
In a sense, like in an unspoken way.
So talk about that. That's even deadlier, by the way. When it's unspoken but so clear, that means they're doing something very clearly. So what was the unspoken message in your childhood?
The unspoken message was that if I wasn't, mostly like school and behavior at home, I was one of 5 and I'm the eldest. And if I wasn't making myself be like a good example with my grades or my behavior, like I said, that's when I would get kind of the attention and being reprimanded. But it wasn't like beforehand, if that makes sense, that I was expected to get the good grades and have good behavior. It was more like the afterthought.
Correct. No, that is the way parents traditionally created their vision for their child. They didn't say a word. They just punished you when you deterred. And that's how you learned, oh, I won't do that again. I won't get a B again because she gives me a punishment. And, oh, when I got an A, I didn't get anything. So you associate the punishment with the action. And then through that negative association, that's how all children learn, through fear, through punishment, through dread. You didn't get an A because it was natural to you, and I'm sure you were smart, but you didn't just get an A because it was natural. You didn't just get an A out of joy. You got an A out of a fear of getting the B, you see? And that's what most of us were raised by, that traditional way of parenting where we were scared to death. And that's what motivated us. So right now, you have brought that little girl with you into your mothering. That little girl who's still trying to impress mommy and daddy, who's still trying to check boxes all day long. And actually, your daughter is part of your project, part of the trophy you want to take home. Like, look, mommy, look, daddy, I continued my success, and even my daughter is successful. Do you see how amazing she is? Because I'm so amazing. And if you or any of us run our children dry like that, like we take them to the grind, we push them, and we relentlessly get upset with them, we are going to repeat that pattern where she is going to withdraw eventually, and she's going to feel the shame of, quote unquote, being a B grade child. So when we become parents, we have the choice. Do we want to stay on the gear that we have all our childhoods, the high-paced, fast-paced gear of doing, because we want mommy and daddy to praise us? Or do we realize that as parents now, we need to shift the gear? We cannot be those little children seeking praise anymore, because that will drive us crazy. That will push us to empty, and we'll have nothing to give our children. Children need mothers and fathers who come to the present moment fully calm, fully present, on full tank, ready to give. You're smiling because, I'm sure that's because you're not that at all. None of us are. Because we think we can raise children as one more thing we do in the day. Children are not just one more thing. They're not one more grade, one more exam. They demand a very different energy from us. So the question for you really is not about bedtime or your child. It's about, are you able to let go of that little girl needing the praise of her mother and father? Can you become a new kind of adult, a new kind of woman, so you can be the best mother for your child? Now that's going to be the challenge.
That totally makes sense. And I think that's something that I've been working on, and it's very hard because it's almost in every hat that I wear in my day-to-day. It's in everything. It's seeped into everything.
Yes, your overachievement, your desire to be the best parent, your desire to show up for your children, that's so amazing about you. You have this zeal, you have this desire. Many parents don't even know they should do that. So you're already winning in the game of conscious parenting. However, what you're not realizing is that you're running yourself empty and you're missing how to connect with my child. My child doesn't need a super successful mother. My child doesn't need accolades or fancy things. My child needs my presence, my connection. And that sometimes means allowing them to have their moment, right? Allowing them to be 4-year-olds and not making them little mini machines. You're a machine. You can work nonstop. You're on point. You're in high gear. But that's not fair to impose it. And you have a daughter. When mothers are critical of their same-sex children, our daughters, they pick it up very quickly and deeply. You picked up on your mother's vibe towards you. Your daughter is picking up on your vibe. So your criticism of her, your judgment of her is the mother wound. And fathers do this for their sons. We want to be, their best friend or their best influencer or their best everything, but it's all about you. Your daughter needs to be seen by you for who it is she is. Right now, she's just a 4-year-old, and you're expecting her to be how you are. Super achieving, super efficient, super doing, super capable. And that's not fair.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah. But ultimately, you're riding yourself the hardest, Andrea. So it's when you stop riding yourself and you relax into your own worth, you will allow your daughter to do the same.
I mean, that's the goal, is like to set that good example for her. And I think this is the hardest kind of habit that I have that is hardest to break.
Yes. So, what's one takeaway that you're going to leave this conversation with? What's one aha or insight or takeaway?
Yeah, I think I've known this from what you've said before about like connecting before correcting. I love that phrase, but what you said earlier about bedtime being the most important time, 15 minutes, however long it takes of the whole day, that really resonated with me and really makes me cautious of making sure that I do have that energy at the end of the day to save time for that connection with her.
Beautiful. And I know it's hard, and our children can be so demanding and so capricious in their moods. But that's why, especially with young children, and I think teenagers, we need to be available to shift gears, to move where they need us to. And if we don't have the energy for that shifting, then we're going to throw a tantrum. So I really appreciate your joining us and teaching us so much. I've really been illuminated by this conversation myself, reminding myself how not to be super mom and just be a present mom. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Shefali.
I'm sure so many of you could relate to that story where we are so busy doing so many things, trying to do it all, and unable to connect with our children as they need. Coming up next, a father who's struggling to connect with his pre-teen. When our children turn to teenagers, I mean, literally, I think something happens to them. I often describe it as if the Martians have come down on Earth, abducted our lovely child, and taken them far away, never to be seen again for another 15 years. It's heartbreaking for us parents because we lose that connection that we loved, and we struggle with those transition times in their lives. Joining me now is Shaka, a father who is experiencing exactly this. Hi, Shaka. Tell us your struggle.
Hey, Dr. Shefali, such a pleasure to see you. So my struggle is an unexpected surprise for me, and it centers around communication with my 12-year-old son, Sekou. Growing up, Sekou was very communicative. We had great conversations. We talked about everything, the universe, cars, animals, flowers, whatever you can think of. He was just a little chatterbox. And now that he's 12 and in the sixth grade, I'm like, where is that little boy who I had these great conversations with? Now, when I ask him a question, it's a one-word response, and I can say, hey, son, how's your day? And he'll just be like, good. How are you feeling? Okay. And it's very difficult for me. I mean, as a dad who really values being open and really being emotionally available and having that connection, I have a bit of concern. You know, growing up, my dad worked a lot. We didn't get a chance to spend as much quality time as I get to spend with Sekou. And it wasn't until my later years when me and my dad began to talk a lot. And it was amazing and incredible. And I've never actually asked him what was his struggle when I was a preteen or a teenager, but that is my struggle today.
So let me first ask you, how were you as a teenager in terms of your emotional connection to yourself looking back?
Well, I had a very different experience than my son, Sekou. I grew up in the streets of Detroit. I ran away from home when I was a kid, and I experienced high levels of trauma very early on, from about 13 all the way to 19 when I went off to prison. And so I was very emotionally closed off, and I had dealt with trauma. I had to internalize a lot of the negativity I experienced. And so I was not really open to communicating with anyone in a real deep and meaningful way.
Yeah, and for those of you listening, I was so surprised when Shaka wrote back on Instagram saying he wanted to be here because I've known Shaka professionally and personally. His book is called Righting My Wrongs, and it is a masterpiece all about your journey, Shaka. I just so applaud your bravery in being so vulnerable with your story. You teach so many of us. So here's the key, right, Shaka? When you were around his age, right, when did you eventually really get into gangs and really lose yourself into that street life? Was it around 13, 14?
Yeah, exactly. It was around, 13, which is, Sekou was 1 year away from. And by that point, I was pretty much closed off. I was kind of insular in terms of just thinking about life and my experiences. And there was part of me that was still innocent up until it wasn't.
But that's it, right? So now you're seeing him, and it's in a very subconscious way. You may not be aware of it. It's reminding you of the young boy you used to be. And you have worked so hard to not be the parents you had. You've worked so hard to be emotionally available to Sekou. But now you're projecting your trauma onto him, because what he is displaying, and I've met Sekou, is a completely normal growth curve for children transitioning to adolescence. But because of your trauma, because of what happened to you and how far left and down south you went, right, down the slope, hurtling so fast that I think you look at him closing off and you think, oh my God, this is traumatic. Oh my goodness, I'm losing my son, because you lost yourself at this age. Right?
Yeah, that really makes a lot of sense. When I think about it, and that's kind of the self-talk that I'm always doing, is that, Sekou has a very different experience. Obviously, I've been doing, reading on what happens in preteens and, what happens when they turn teenagers. And even with this wisdom and this knowledge, as a parent, it still feels, it doesn't feel the best as a dad. It's like, where's my little buddy? I really enjoy that. So I think part of it is that subconscious thing that you're talking about. And the other part of it is that I'm consciously aware of. It's like, I miss my little guy who we would just talk about any and everything. And so even though I'm aware that these things are changing, it doesn't feel good.
It doesn't feel good, and it's not fair, almost we are like protesting, right? Our little boys and girls inside us, we've spent so much time, we've worked so hard. But here's the thing, Shaka, what you see as a disconnection is really an invitation for a different kind of bonding. Now he doesn't need that father to talk about the stars and the moon and the sun and every single thing. He needs you now to step from center stage to backstage. And Shaka, I think that's very hard for you, because you wanted a father so much in your childhood that you put this relationship with Sekou, I've watched you both together, you made it such a priority and such an identity of Shaka's, that now that you're displaced from the most important thing in your son's life, and now he's put you in the back seat a little bit, and watch, when he really starts driving, he'll leave you by the curb. that feels very displacing for all of us parents, but especially someone like you who's put it at the forefront of their identity. So understand that as they grow up, the most conscious father you can be now is to gracefully release them to be on their own center stage. And yeah, sorry, you have to go back into the wings. But that doesn't mean you're not vital. It doesn't mean he's rejecting you. It doesn't mean he's shutting down and going to go to the streets like you did. All it means is he needs space now, Shaka. And many fathers need to hear this, their presence is sometimes overpowering. Their presence is sometimes, anyone who knows you, Shaka, knows you're the leader wherever you go. You're the most charismatic person in the room. You have a story to tell. You're the teacher. You're the guru. You're on stage. And that can be very overpowering, especially for the same-sex child. I think it's your invitation. He's trying to tell you, Dad, now I need to figure myself out. You go find your own friends. Go get another identity. I need to figure out who Sekou is without Shaka. And your greatest gift now is to trust him. You have done such an amazing job. Can you allow his masculinity now to take charge? Shaka, you're a very masculine presence. That can be overpowering for a son. And you're a celebrity, you're a star. So can you now ease away and go way back in the wings and watch from the bleachers, right? Watch from the benches, the magnificence of the parenting you've put in all this time. And this is for every mother out there too. We have to take a big chill pill, go back into our lane and create a new identity now, because you've done your job. Yes, you're missing your buddy, but your buddy needs to be on their own, and kind of find their own wings, and then they will return. The Martians will drop our kids back in their 20s, and then you'll have a buddy again. But can you give him room to fly, right? That is the question.
All of this makes a lot of sense. And one of the things I've been aware of, obviously through our conversations and through reading your work, is the importance of like not centering myself. I definitely do consciously work on making sure that I separate Shaka that the world knows from Shaka, the dad. And when I'm at home, I'm trying to be super chill and nonchalant. And so that was one of my things, was like, am I being too nonchalant and letting him just kind of, have his own space, his own world? He's getting into sports now, and which is very interesting for me. I'm a big sports person. I love athletics, but I tried to have a little bit more of a hands off, because I know how intimidating that can be. Even though I didn't experience that with my dad, I did have older brothers, and I know what it feels like to have that kind of pressure. And so I'm always thinking about, like, when I'm home, I just want to, and it's for myself as well, I really just want to be dad. I don't want to be on the stage. I want to chill out and watch sports and all the things. But it makes a lot of sense to be even more aware that, he's leaning into this different part of life. It's not personal, which is the big thing for me, and that he's okay. So I really appreciate all that you're sharing in regards to just, I understand that he's at a different stage in his life. He'll be fine. I try to think of that, all the time. I think it's one of the things that it hasn't, that's why I still have here. Otherwise, I probably would have pulled it out by now. But this is additive and really going to help me to think about that a lot more clearly.
I think for the same sex, and I'm talking stereotypically, child, to have an overpowering presence in the parent is very intimidating, and they need to. That's why they reject us. That's why they'll verbally reject us and say, I hate you, or they'll slam the door. And I know Seku's not doing all that, but were he to do that, it's also natural, because they have to individuate. But to individuate from a same-sex parent who's so overwhelmingly powerful like you, Shaka, even more so. So if all he's doing is just withdrawing, it means he's now recharging his batteries to become the man you've always wanted him to become. So allow him the wingspan to flutter those wings, to fall apart, to fail. But you need to go way back and become a whisper. Parents like us, and I too, because I'm a little bit known with my daughter, I had to be very conscious to tone it the way back. Like, I'm just saying, hey, why don't you wear a raincoat? But for her, it's, oh, you're trying to be Dr. Shefali, aren't you? So I tone it way down to allow that person to feel like they are the majestic ones. They are the kings and the queens. So let's dethrone ourselves. Let's not center ourselves. Let's move from center stage to backstage. And yes, be nonchalant, but always watchful, right? You're always watching, but appear nonchalant so that they have room to breathe around us. Part of being very conscious, like you and I have been, it can be suffocating. We are always there. We always know what to say. We always have the right answer. We're always ready to reframe into the positive. How annoying are we? Right? We can be very annoying. So I think we have to be very mindful to tone it down and allow our children to find their way and their space. And he is always going to be a buddy. I have watched you with your son, the way you've been so present with him. That's not gone. It's just that needs to take a back seat, and now he has to enter the driver's seat and dictate his own mistakes. So here's one challenging question, because I think this is going to come up for you. How are you going to handle when he does go down that quote unquote wrong path? Suppose he does get into the wrong crowd, act a little, rowdy with you because he's growing his wings, or suppose he does dabble in a few drugs. How is Shaka going to handle it, given that you've worked so hard to get out of that?
Well, that's a great question, and I think that the answer I'm going to give is really truly a reflection of a lot of things that I've learned from reading Conscious Parenting, and I really believe this from my soul. Like, Seku's life is his life, and whatever choices he makes in life, those are things that as a parent, I'll support whatever needs to be supported. But ultimately, it's his life. And that's one of the things that excites me about being a father, is that as rich and full of love as I am, I'm also, realistic that, his life is not my life. He has to make his own mistakes. He has to fall down. He has to pick himself up. He has to pull himself together. And, obviously, I don't wish for him to have any of those experiences that I've had. But in the event that he does, one of the things I feel good about is that I'm equipped because of my own experience to understand them. I can't fix things for him. Ultimately, he will have to make those decisions. But I feel confident. I feel good. I'm sure it will be heartbreaking in all the ways that, it is heartbreaking when you see someone you love suffer. But the wisdom of understanding that each individual life is just that. It's an individual life. And ultimately, his outcomes are his responsibility.
Amen. And Shaka, you are such a testament to that adult who really took his life and alchemized it to the highest level of service for others. You took all that pain. How old were you when you were released from prison, Shaka?
So I went to prison when I was 19 and I came out of prison when I was 38.
38. And when did you publish your book?
I published my book. Originally, I self-published in 2013, so I was 41.
Yeah, and Shaka writes how he wrote his whole book with just the nib, just the ink part of the pen. I mean, I'm riveted by your story. You've been on Oprah, and you are really that parent who reparented himself, who re-healed all the old wounds, and now you are coming from a place of wholeness and really serving the world and your children. Thank you so much, Shaka, for being here and sharing your story.
Thank you so much for having me, and I truly appreciate just the wisdom and the way that you really guide us and help us see all the dimensions of parenting, which can be very difficult, especially for men, and as a man who really understands the value and way that it really helps kids to navigate life of being emotionally available and vulnerable. I can't thank you enough for so many of the lessons you've given both in your book and in our conversation. So thank you again for having me and for answering my question.
Thank you, Shaka. Thank you for being here. Ah, what a story that was. I always learn so much from Shaka because he is the example of examples of how it's never too late to start all over again. And his life is a paragon, symbol of how we can alchemize our pain into the greatest service for ourselves and others. So when our children go through transition periods in life, whether in the day, as in to bedtime or going to school, or in major transitions, like when they become teenagers, we parents lose our footing. You see, we adults like things to be predictable. We like things to be in a box. We like things to be checked off. We like our routines. But here's the thing about children. They don't care for our routines. They don't care for predictability. They are following the impetus of their own inner unfolding. So we parents have the choice. Either we stay on track with them and attune to them. And what I mean by attune is we stay beside them, witnessing where they are at and contouring our behavior to match what they need, or we fall astray and they leave us behind, and then we're completely disconnected from them. What is the choice you as a parent are going to make today? Are you going to choose to step in line and attune, which means pay attention? What does my child need from me? Or are you going to just blindly roughshod over them and just do it your way? Both of them will demand a price from you. In the first one, when you attune, the price you pay is that you will have to slow down. You will have to stop following your agenda. You will have to declutter your schedule. You will have to silence yourself and truly pay attention to your child. That takes energy. The other way, where you're not going to attune and just do it your way, well, that will demand another kind of price. And that price will be a disconnected relationship with your child. So I always tell parents every day, make the right choice. Fight the good fight, the fight where you fight to be present, where you clean up your schedule, where you clear out your mind so that you can attune with what your children need. It's always a dance. Should I step in or fall back? Should I lean in or stay on the sidelines? Should I be by my child's side, center stage, or should I go back into the wings, backstage? This is the tightrope of parenting. It's not a science, but it is indeed an art. It is the art of conscious parenting. If you enjoyed listening to this, if you got some jewels of wisdom, don't forget to subscribe, share it with those you love, and I will see you on the next episode of Parenting and You with me, Dr. Shefali. Parenting and You with Dr. Shefali is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for professional medical, psychological, psychotherapeutic, coaching, healthcare, or other qualified professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment.